My name is Madison Reynolds. I'm 27 years old, and I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Under normal circumstances, this fact should fill me with joy, excitement, and a slight anticipation of a new life. But instead, I'm sitting at the kitchen table in my apartment in Seattle, Washington, surrounded by stacks of wedding invitations, and I feel anxiety growing inside me. The embossed white paper seems too perfect for the amount of pain it unearths in me. I slowly go through the envelopes, checking the names against the list on my phone. Friends, relatives, colleagues, people who have been with Owen, my future husband, and me at different stages of our lives. And there's one name that's missing. The name of the woman who is officially considered my stepmother. I deliberately left it blank. Without haste, without hesitation. And yet now, looking at the envelopes, I feel a heaviness in my chest, as if I'm doing something wrong. Not because it's actually wrong, but because I've been taught to think that way since childhood. The story of this emptiness began long before the wedding. Long before I learned to stand up for myself. It began when I was 5 years old, the year my family ceased to be whole. My parents divorced without dramatic scenes. There was no broken crockery, no shouting or slamming doors. There was only a quiet evening, the kitchen, and two adults trying to find the words to explain to a child that her world would never be the same again. "We both love you very much," my mother, Jenna, said, squeezing my hand tightly. "And that will never change," my father, Brian, added, but his voice trembled. They explained that I would live with each of them in turn. At the time, it seemed fair to me. I didn't understand what divorce was. I only knew that I would have two homes. In my childish perception, it even seemed like a bonus. The first few years after the divorce were truly bright. Dad worked as a consultant for a construction company and could often plan his own time. During his weeks, we went on short trips. Portland, Tacoma. Sometimes we just went out of town to spend the night in roadside motels and eat burgers from paper bags. He called them our adventures. I felt special. Mom's life was different, calmer, more predictable. Morning breakfasts, the smell of fresh coffee, neat stacks of books on the shelves. She read to me before bed, braided my hair, and always found time to listen. I felt loved, important, needed. And then Dad said he wanted to introduce me to a woman. Her name was Sharon. She was beautiful, that cold, adult beauty that makes a child feel awkward around her. Perfectly styled dark hair, impeccable manicure, a calm smile that lacked any warmth. "Hello, Madison," she said, leaning down to me. "I hope we'll get along." I nodded. I was always an obedient child. At first, everything seemed normal. Sharon wasn't rude. She didn't raise her voice. She helped me with my homework, sometimes bought me ice cream, asked standard questions about school. I tried to like her. I tried very hard. But over time, something changed. I didn't understand it right away. It wasn't sudden. Rather, it was like a gradual cooling when you're not freezing yet, but you're already starting to shiver. I learned the truth by accident. I overheard an adult conversation in the kitchen when I thought no one could hear me. "The doctor said there was no hope," Sharon said. "I will never be able to have children." There was so much anger and pain in her voice that I became frightened. Dad was saying something in response, trying to calm her down. And I stood in the hallway and, for the first time in my life, felt guilty for being born. From that day on, I began to notice changes. Small but painful ones. "Madison, go to your room," Sharon would say when I tried to sit with them in the living room. "Adults are talking. Don't make noise. Don't run. Don't laugh so loudly." One day, I asked my dad, "Why don't we go anywhere together anymore?" He hesitated, looked at her as if seeking permission. Things are different now, sweetheart. You're old enough to understand, Sharon interjected. Adults have their own lives. Don't be selfish. The word selfish stung more than a slap. I was 7 years old. From that moment on, I began to disappear. I became quieter, more cautious. I learned to walk around the house without making a sound. I stopped asking questions. I stopped asking for things. And every time I returned to my mother, it felt like I could breathe again. But every time it was my turn to go to my father's, a knot tightened inside me. I didn't yet know words like toxicity or emotional abuse. I just knew one thing. There was no place for me in that house. I don't remember the moment I decided to become compliant. It wasn't a conscious choice. Rather, it was a slow process, as if someone was gradually turning down the volume in my life until only a barely perceptible whisper remained of me. In my father's house, I ceased to be a child. I became a problem that needed to be minimized. Sharon didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw tantrums. She acted subtly, precisely, as if every step she took had been planned in advance. And that's what made everything so particularly agonizing. I couldn't point to anything specific and say, "Look, she's hurting me." Because formally, she was polite. "Madison," she would say in a soft, almost sweet tone, "don't you think you've been sitting in the living room for too long? Go play in your room." I tried to object. "But I want to be here with Dad." Her smile would become thinner. "Your father needs peace and quiet after work. Is that really so hard to understand?" Dad didn't look at me. He was scrolling through his phone, pretending the conversation didn't concern him. I would go to my room and close the door. Sometimes I would cry quietly, burying my face in my pillow so no one would hear. Over time, the list of rules grew. I had to speak more quietly, not laugh loudly, not turn on the TV without permission, not walk around the house after 9 in the evening, not leave things out in the open. Each rule seemed like a trifle, but together they created a cage. One day I laughed, just laughed, at a silly TV show. Sharon stormed out of the kitchen like a hurricane. "I asked you to be quiet," she said sharply. I don't care. There are rules in this house." The words "in this house" stung again. I nodded, holding back tears, and left. I tried to talk to Dad. Several times. Carefully, choosing my words. "I think Sharon doesn't like me," I said once. He sighed wearily. "You're too sensitive. She's trying. Just give her time." But time didn't help. It only made her more confident. And me, quieter. When I turned 12, I broke down. It was an ordinary evening. I had finished my homework, tidied my room, and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. Sharon glanced at me and said, "You could look neater. Normal girls take care of themselves." Something inside me snapped. I locked myself in the bathroom and burst into tears, not quietly, but truly, for the first time in a long time. That same evening, I told my mother everything. She listened silently, but with each sentence I spoke, her face grew darker. When I finished, she jumped up and started pacing the room. "This is not normal," she said. "You can't treat a child like that." She called my father. I could hear the shouting even from my room. I heard my mother accusing him of inaction, threatening him with legal action. I didn't want this. I just wanted to be heard. A few days later, my father sat me down at the table. "We need to talk," he said coldly. Sharon sat next to him, her hands folded in her lap. "You're putting me in a difficult position," he continued. "Your mother is threatening to take away my right to see you." I felt the ground give way beneath my feet. I didn't want. "You need to stop complaining," he interrupted. Sharon is trying to be a good wife and stepmother. And you're ruining everything. Sharon looked at me with an expression of quiet triumph. Do you want us to break up? My father asked. Do you want to lose me? I burst into tears.
No.
Then be grateful and stop making things up. At that moment, something inside me died. I understood a simple truth. If I told the truth, I would lose my father. From that day on, I never complained again. To anyone. Ever. I became perfect. Obedient. Quiet. I did everything that was asked of me. I disappeared when I was asked to. I didn't ask for anything in return. I lived in constant fear of doing something wrong. The fear of destroying the fragile balance in which I existed. Every 2 weeks, returning to my mother, I felt like I was returning to life. But even there, a part of me remained constrained. I was no longer the same. I began to believe that there really was something wrong with me. And it was with this feeling that I entered adolescence, an age where it's especially important to know that you are needed by someone. Adolescence came quietly, without warning, but it brought with it new desires and new reasons for pain. I was no longer a little girl who could be content with dolls and cartoons. I wanted to be like everyone else. Not better, just not worse. Ordinary things. A smartphone that doesn't freeze every 5 minutes. A laptop for school. Clothes that I wouldn't be ashamed to wear in front of my classmates. I didn't ask for much. I hardly asked for anything at all. But sometimes the needs became too obvious to ignore. Dad initially understood. He had always been a man who believed that money was needed for the family's comfort. When I turned 14, he bought me a phone. Not the newest, but a good one. I was happy. Exactly until the moment I saw Sharon's face. She didn't say anything in front of me. She waited until the evening. But I heard their conversation from my room. You're spoiling her, she said sharply. She doesn't appreciate what she gets. It's for school, Dad objected. Don't make me laugh. For selfies and chatting. You're wasting money. After that, everything changed. Sharon took control of my expenses. Now, if I needed new sneakers or a jacket, she would take care of it herself. This meant trips to discount stores and endless, this will still do. I wasn't against saving money, but the clothes were often the wrong size, outdated, uncomfortable. Sometimes I would catch the glances of my classmates and pretend I didn't care. I pretended it didn't hurt. Meanwhile, Sharon's wardrobe was a separate reality. Dresses with tags still attached, designer bags, new shoes almost every month. She could spend hours in front of the mirror, discussing boutique sales with her friends. I remained silent. Dad saw it, but he preferred to ignore it. The most painful blow was the car. Dad promised me one when I finished high school. Nothing special, a used, old car, but it would be mine. For me, it wasn't just a means of transportation. It was proof that I still mattered. I had been waiting for this day for years. But the night before we were supposed to go look at cars, a scandal erupted in the house. Are you crazy? Sharon shouted. We can't afford this. We agreed, Dad tried to say. And what about me? My car isn't new anymore. I sat in my room, hugging my knees to my chest, and I knew how it would all end. In the morning, Dad came to my room. About the car? He began, and then fell silent. It's okay, Dad, I said before he could finish. I understand.
He looked relieved.
I'll pay for your college, okay? That's more important. I smiled. Automatically. A month later, Sharon got a new car. That's when I finally understood. It was never about the money. It was about me. When it came time to choose a college, I put everything into it. I spent hours studying websites, programs, campuses. I found a university that was perfect for me, a strong department not far from home, and a reasonable cost. I was accepted. I was happy until the moment Sharon saw the numbers. "This is madness," she said. "We're not going to pay for her entertainment." She brought brochures from other colleges, cheaper, further away, colder. "It will be good for her to live further away. She'll learn to be independent." I didn't argue. I already knew that arguing was pointless. I went to the college she had chosen. My mother and her husband David were happy for me. They didn't know the price I had paid for this decision. I didn't tell them. I didn't want to spoil their joy. But it was then, for the first time in a long time, that I felt a strange sensation: freedom. I no longer lived in a house where I had to be a shadow. I could laugh,
talk, exist.
I didn't know yet that the most painful part was still to come. College was a breath of fresh air after being underwater for so long. I was studying at a small university in Idaho, far from home, far from familiar routes, and most importantly, far from Sharon. For the first few months, I caught myself still living with an inner fear. I spoke more quietly than I wanted to. I apologized for no reason. I double-checked my words before speaking them. Only over time did I begin to understand how deeply ingrained the habit of being invisible had become in me. In the dorm, they called me too polite. My roommate once laughed. "You apologize all the time, even when it's my fault." I smiled, but it hurt inside, because it was true. I came home for the holidays, dividing my time between my mother and father. At my mother's, I again felt warmth, care, and conversations at the kitchen table. At my father's, cold politeness and constant tension. I was no longer a child, but for Sharon, that changed nothing. One day, during the winter holidays, she said, "I hope you don't think this house is yours. You're a guest here." That phrase stuck in my head like a shard of glass. My father remained silent. In my second year, something happened that finally put everything in its place. My father called me and said that it was Sharon's birthday, and she would really like me to come. I was surprised, but a glimmer of hope stirred inside, small, foolish, but alive. I bought her a gift, not expensive, but chosen with a sincere desire to please. A silk scarf in a warm shade. I saved up for it from my scholarship. When I arrived, the house was full of guests. Laughter, music, glasses clinking. I took a deep breath and approached Sharon. "Happy birthday," I said, handing her the gift. She looked at me as if she had seen something unpleasant. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. I was taken aback. "Dad said you wanted to see me." "Get out," she said louder. "You're not welcome here." The people around us fell silent. I felt dozens of eyes on me. Sharon snatched the bag from me and threw it in the trash can. "I don't need handouts from you." I don't remember how I got to my room. I only remember the trembling in my hands as I packed my things. I remember the laughter from the living room. I left, and I never went back. I told my mother everything. For the first time, everything. She cried with me. She was angry. She hugged me. The next day, my father called. "Why did you leave the party?" he asked coldly. "She kicked me out," I replied. "Stop lying," he said. "You should apologize." At that moment, I understood. I had lost him. I hung up the phone and cried, not from pain, but from realization. Some doors close forever. After I left my father's house that night, my life seemed to be divided into before and after. I never went back there, neither physically nor emotionally. My father and I occasionally talked on the phone, neutrally, carefully, like people who are afraid to say an extra word so as not to destroy the fragile truce. He never apologized, and I stopped waiting for it. I graduated from college with honors, got a job at a marketing company in San Jose, and for the first time in my life, I started earning my own money. It was a strange feeling, buying things without hesitation, without making excuses, without feeling guilty. I rented a small apartment, drank coffee on the balcony in the mornings, and gradually learned to listen to myself. Not the quiet girl from the past, but an adult woman with the right to have a voice. That's when Ethan came into my life. He worked in the next apartment, calm, attentive, with a warm gaze. He didn't try to fix or change me. He was simply there. He listened. He noticed things. He remembered the little details. One day he said, "You know, you deserve so much more than you think." Those words struck me harder than any declarations of love. We were together for 4 years. During that time, I told him everything. About Sharon. About my father. About the constant feeling of guilt. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make excuses. He simply squeezed my hand. When he proposed to me, simply, without fanfare, in the kitchen one evening, I said, yes, without a moment's hesitation. And that's when the past decided to remind me of itself. I sent my father a wedding invitation. Just one. Without Sharon's name. I knew it would cause a storm. But I couldn't lie anymore, neither to him nor to myself. He called a week later. "You've insulted my wife," he said, without even saying hello. "After everything she's done for you." I laughed. A short, bitter laugh. "After everything she's done for me? Are you serious?" For the first time in many years, I said everything. About the humiliation. About the money. About that night. About the discarded gift. He was silent for a long time. And then he said softly, "I didn't know. God, I was so blind." He cried. He apologized. He begged for forgiveness. He promised to make everything right. I believed him.
Cautiously.
But I believed him. We started talking more often. He asked about the wedding. He offered help. I allowed myself to hope. And that's why the blow was so painful. The day before the wedding, he called again. "Sharon is ill," he said sharply. "She's had a heart attack. It's because of you." He wouldn't be coming. He blamed me. I cried in Ethan's arms, feeling something inside me finally break completely. And in the morning, I saw Sharon's photos on social media. Alive, healthy, dramatically suffering. And then her friend called me.
"She made it all up," she said.
"So that your father wouldn't come." And then I understood. It was all over. The morning of my wedding arrived unexpectedly calmly. I woke up before the alarm in the hotel room, where soft light filtered through the translucent curtains. For a second, I just lay there listening to the breathing beside me. Ethan was still asleep, his back turned to me. His presence was calming, like an anchor holding me in the present. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And, against all odds, it was. But the path to this morning was strewn with the wreckage of the past. I slowly got up, went to the window, and looked down at the waking city. People were hurrying about their business, unaware of the storm I had weathered in the last 24 hours. The conversation with my father, Sharon's lies, the call from her friend, all of it swirled in my head, but not as intensely anymore. The pain had dulled, giving way to clarity. I no longer expected him to choose me. There was a knock at the door. It was my mother. She hugged me as tightly as only a woman can hug who has felt for many years that her child was hurting, but didn't know how much. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. My bridesmaids, my mother and Kelly, my stepsister, my mother's husband's daughter, were already gathered in the bridal room. Laughter, soft music, the rustling of fabric. For the first time in a long time, I felt not tense but protected. When the makeup artist finished, I looked at myself in the mirror and suddenly didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She was calm, confident,
Whole.
"You're beautiful," my mother said. I swallowed. "Mom, who will walk me down the aisle?" The room fell silent. She looked at me intently, then smiled. "I think Tom would be very happy to do it, but only if you want him to."
Tom.
My mother's husband. The man who never tried to take my father's place, and that's precisely why he became one. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I would really like that. When the music started and the doors to the hall opened, Tom took my arm. His hand was warm and steady. He didn't say a word, and there was no need to. Each step down the aisle seemed to erase years of doubt, shame, and pain. I looked ahead at Ethan, who smiled at me as if nothing else in the world existed. In that moment, I understood. I hadn't come here alone. I was guided by love and choice. The wedding passed in a blur. Vows, laughter, tears of joy, embraces. I didn't think about my father. I didn't think about Sharon. Their absence was no longer an emptiness. It had become neutral. 2 days later, while packing for our honeymoon, I posted a few wedding photos on social media, just for friends and family. A comment appeared almost immediately. It was Sharon. Shameful. To be walked down the aisle by a stranger when your own father isn't even invited. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Before, such words would have broken me. Before, I would have made excuses, cried, doubted myself. But not now. Ethan came up behind me and put his hands on my shoulders. "Are you okay?" I smiled.
Yes.
"Absolutely." I pressed the block button. Then another. My father's name disappeared next. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Some doors need to be closed not because you are weak, but because you have become stronger. That evening, we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. Ethan held my hand, and I thought about the little girl who had once learned to be a shadow to survive. If I could tell her something now, I would say, "You are not superfluous. You are not a problem. You are worthy of love. And one day you will find people who will truly see you." I finally knew it, and that was enough.